Hey everyone, it's Ryan Rice. On this episode, I want to go over the crankbait and the lipless. We're going to make this a combo video to kind of cover how we set up for both presentations and all the different options you can do. So the crankbaits, you can see I carry a variation of the depth that they dive and also colors and also kinds. I mean, you have your standard square bills that run extremely shallow. You know, you got your deep diving crankbaits. I got ones here that run down to like 19 feet, and you can see how big this bill is. So, you know, when it's tied off to the actual bill itself, not the nose, it really dives down sharply that way, and that's why it's tied off that way, so it can dive down and get down there nice and deep. You know, I use a whole variations of brands. I mean, this is a Rapala. You know, I use a lot of Strike Kings. You know, I got the 4.0, I got the 2.5, the 1.5, and those things are really tangled up. You also have the flat-sided crankbait too, and I use those right now when the water's cold, and I got actually tied on one of my rods right now, but you can also see I have another one here. This one dives a little deeper, and what I do is I actually write with Sharpie on the crankbait how deep they dive, and then I have them labeled in my box the depth that they dive too. But in case they get mixed up, at least I know, or if I grab one real quick without looking, you know, I can see how deep they dive by just picking up the crankbait and looking at the bottom of them. And I got this one that runs 3 to 5. I got one that runs 6. When the water's clear, I use natural colors. You know, I got ones that look like shads. I got one, you know, got the shad color here. I got, you know, ones that are also called like a shad color from different brands. They have a little bit more black to the top of them. I mean, and then when the water's dirty or it's really cold water, I end up using crankbaits with a red or an orange color to it. You know, it just makes it more vibrant. And when the water's dirty, they can be seen a lot better. I mean, I even got lime, you know, almost like a lime green. You know, especially when this one dives that deep, you know, it's harder for the fish to see the bait at the bottom. So being a little bit more vibrant also helps you catch fish too as well. I mean, I got, you know, almost like a bluegill color. I mean, I carry all sorts of crankbaits just because I love it, but the main thing is keeping them organized in a nice container. You can see I use a little bit of a larger container for all my crankbaits, and I have them separated with a, you know, per size with a label maker, and I also write on them with how deep they dive. You know, as far as a lipless, I don't carry too many different colors. It's either like a mirror image like this, you know, it's got like a very reflective color to it. You know, this one's made by Vicious. I think this one's made by Strike King, the red eye shad. I use these and a little bit more when the water's dirtier, and I do have some orange ones too, but I think I'm out of those right now because I think I've lost them. Yeah, right now my rod, I have more of a shad color, natural color, lipless tied on right now because the water's a little bit more clear where I'm fishing. But you know, for the most part, I don't carry too many different colors of lipless because with all that vibration and everything else in the bait itself, I mean, I think it's more based on the sound more than really the color when it comes to the lipless. You know, so the lipless has a lot of rattles in it, and you know, these are great for all different depths. You don't have to change, you know, your bait as much with a lipless because it sinks, so it's going to cover all your different water columns with just one bait. You know, the crankbait, you have to untie and tie in different ones to get the different depths. But you know, that's why I like using these two baits. You know, I like to move fast. It's hard for me to sit still and fish slow, even though a lot of times you have to. But you know, if you guys have been following along, you guys know I love the crankbait and I love the lipless. You know, the crankbait I have tied on right now is a flat-sided. I think this is the Fritz side from Berkeley, if I'm not mistaken. But you can see, yeah, it's by Berkeley. Yeah, the Berkeley Fritz side. But you can see this one has a little bit of a grayish brown and like almost like a cream pearl white color to it. And right now I'm using the flat side because the water's a little bit more colder right now, and I don't want a lot of action, side to side action like you do with your square bills and all those rattles. This is a silent bait, especially when you hold those hooks. But you know, you get a little bit of sound from the hooks going back and forth, but when you hold those hooks, you know, this is a very subtle bait, and that's what you kind of want to use right now when the water's colder. As far as how I fish the crankbait and the lipless, they're almost the same every season. So, you know, when it's warm out, I fish these very fast and I don't do many pauses. I just kind of cast and retrieve. When it's colder, like right now it is, you know, I'll cast out the flat side, I'll crank it down a bit, and I'll stop. And I will just kind of pull it towards me and pause. And just fish this a lot slower right now. You know, like I said, in those warmer months, I'll just do a steady retrieve like this. And a lot of times I don't use the flat side as much in the warmer months. It's more of a colder water bait to me. Now if the fish are really finicky and I want to keep fishing the crankbait, then I'll use the flat sided, but you know, I won't pause as much. I just do a steady retrieve. But right now when the water's colder, I'll crank it down, I'll stop it for a bit, you know, and just pull it towards me, you know, almost drag it, you know, and I'll fish these baits either deep or shallow. But when I'm in the shallows, you know, like above the grass flats, you know, I'll let this thing dig into the grass. You can feel it as you're pulling it in. You know, as you're pulling this in, you will feel the top of this bait either, you know, hitting the top of the grass or dragging along the bottom. And I'll change up my retrieves. You know, I'll cast it out. Even in the colder months, I will also do a steady retrieve for a longer period, and then I'll just stop and pause it. So it's down, this one's probably down about 4 or 5 feet right now, and I'll just let it sit there, and it'll just kind of hover, almost like a jerk bait. You know, then I'll start retrieving it again, and then I'll stop. Or then at the end, I will also just bring it all the way back in. So I do a lot of stop and, you know, a lot of stop and retrieves during the colder months with both the lipless and the crankbait. Will I use a square bill in the winter months? Absolutely. But when the fish are really hard to, you know, really finicky and don't want to eat as easily, I'll use the flat-sided so it doesn't like spook them, and I will pause it longer. You know, the lipless during the summer months or during the warmer weather, I just cast this out, and these things cast really far. I don't even let it sink. I pretty much let it hit the water, and I'll start reeling and just do a steady retrieve all the way back. You know, I don't burn them. Sometimes I do, but you know, if I do burn them, I'll put them on a higher speed reel. And I usually, only time I burn the lipless is if I'm running through a lot of grass beds and I just want that to go across the, you know, the grass and just burn across it and stir up a bunch of stuff, you know. But in the colder months like this, I will cast it out. Now I'm gonna let it sit and wait. And I'm gonna let it hit the bottom. Then I'll start reeling a bit, and I'll stop it, and then I'll just drag it right along the bottom, almost like a jig, you know. Drag it right along the bottom. Or I will do the yo-yo, and I'll pop it up, let it sit back down. Get the slack out of the line, pop it up, and let it sit back down, and let it sink all the way to the bottom. Same thing. Oh, I think we got some weeds. The line's caught around the hook. Sometimes that happens. It's not a lot, but it does happen sometimes. So that's, you know, that's my 2 retrieves for the most part, or 3 for the lipless. Either I'm going to be running it constantly in the warmer months, or I'm going to let it sink to the bottom and drag it, or I'm going to do the yo-yo effect when it's cold. You know, so it's burning it in the summertime, or just a steady retrieve, and when it's colder, let it sit to the bottom, or let it sink to the bottom, and just kind of drag it along the bottom. You will catch fish this way. It may feel a little weird, or almost like you're dragging a jig or a Texas rig or a Carolina rig, but you will catch fish this way. You know, you're gonna get those fish that are just above the bottom a bit. So I used to fish my lipless on a fiberglass rod, like my crankbait rod, but it feels like I'm losing too many fish that way. So I have changed my lipless over to a medium power rod with an extra fast tip. This is a 6'9" casting rod. It's actually their topwater and jerkbait rod, and that's why I've been fishing the lipless on lately, and haven't fished it on a fiberglass in quite a while, just because I'm losing too many fish doing it that way. But as far as the crankbait, I still fish it on a fiberglass rod. I may change it up, I'm not positive, because I haven't really lost too many fish, but it gives me a lot of give, because you know, my crankbait and my lipless, and if you guys have been following along, I really don't fish monofilament or fluorocarbon. I pretty much fish straight braid. You know, there's a lot of give to this fiberglass rod. You know, fishing straight braid, it's given the chance that the hook is not getting ripped out of their mouth, you know, with like it would if I was using a graphite rod with a crankbait. You know, this fiberglass rod, it's from St. Croix. I've had it now for about 3 or 4 years. It's been holding out pretty great. So you know, will I change when this rod breaks? I may, and just have to adapt to the way I fish my crankbait. But being I'm on straight braid, I'm probably going to continue using a fiberglass rod with the crankbait right now until I either have to change or I want to change. You know, I mean, it's all personal preference, you know, how everybody fishes, you know, and what rods they fish everything on. But this fiberglass rod gives a lot of flexibility for that hook set, and also it's not ripping the, you know, the bait out of the fish's mouth. And it's still pretty sensitive, you know. I know graphite may be a little bit more sensitive than the fiberglass rod, but I do feel everything on the, you know, for the most part with this rod, and that's why I haven't changed. Plus, it hasn't broken yet, so maybe when it breaks, I may change it up. But once again, what you fish your lures on is your personal preference. This is just what I fish it on. With the crankbait, not only will I fish grass beds and open water, I'll also find peaks, you know, or points, and I'll run it right in front of that peak or that point at a, you know, where it sticks out in the water, and there's always a fish, for the most part, always being held at those points. You know, I just caught a fish the other day for that same example. There's a little point that comes out in the water, and there's a little bit of brush down there, and you can feel it going through the brush. You can feel a couple of that, you know, the bait banging against the brush, and all of a sudden you just feel a little bit of a harder, you know, thump on that bait, and you know you have a fish, and then you feel that tug. So, you know, the crankbait, you can fish around structure. You know, it's more of an open water bait just for the simple fact that you have treble hooks, but you can get close to structure and also fish it near open water structure. And, you know, if you usually get hung up with a crankbait, you can just kind of take your kayak, go back around, and pull the other way, and it'll come loose. But, you know, the crankbait is also, you know, you can work that along the bank. Just don't get it into the trees, because we all do that. But you can work it along the bank there. You can get it pretty close where those fish are just off that bank just a bit, or you can run parallel that bank, and you can kind of come this way at them, and, you know, they're sitting back here, and they'll see that bait coming up, and they'll come up to it and grab it. Or you can cast straight at it. You know, a lot of times I run parallel with the bank just for the simple fact it keeps you from getting hung up on the, you know, the trees itself. You know, that you don't cast into the trees, and you'll get those fish coming off the, you know, the bank itself to come grab that bait. You know, so the crankbait and the lipless is two baits I use all year round. You can use them all year round. You just got to change up how you fish them, your speed, your cadence, and how you present it to the fish. But these, you know, these two baits give you the ability to cover a lot of water a lot faster than if you're fishing any other bait. You know, the chatterbait may cover that, you know, that amount of water too, and you can fish that. But, you know, these two baits gives me the ability to cover a lot of water even when it's cold out. So the crankbait and the lipless is really two of my favorite baits, minus anything Texas rigged. But you know, I hope you guys liked this video and got a little bit of information from it, and it helps you guys catch some fish. So as always, stay safe on the water, and I'll catch you guys on the water. Thanks for watching.